Good evening and welcome to the November 4th, 2021 Parks and Recreation Commission regular video meeting. I am Jody McCarthy, Parks and Recreation Commission Chair. In accordance with Proclamation 20-28.10 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order, tonight's Parks and Recreation Commission meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this evening. City staff and consultant Steve Dew of Conservation Techniques are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones. Will the city staff please call the roll?
Chair McCarthy.
Here.
Vice Chair Struck.
Here.
Commissioner Cohen.
Here.
Commissioner Birkenwald. Commissioner Westberg.
Here.
Commissioner Markson.
Here.
Commissioner Burstein.
Present.
Commissioners, before we start the business of tonight's meeting, here are a few rules to help the meeting to run smoothly. If a commissioner has a question, please use the raise hand feature. I will do my best to recognize commissioners in the order in which hands are raised. Everyone will be asked to limit himself or herself to one question and to one clarifying question, if necessary, so that each commissioner has a chance to ask a question before a commissioner is given another chance to ask a question. Additionally, prior to speaking, please state your name for those listening in on the meeting. Tonight's agenda will not include in-person public appearances in accordance with Proclamation 20-28.11 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order. However, individuals wishing to speak live during the appearances portion of our meeting may do so by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing application. Provided, however, they registered their desire to speak with the city admin staff by 4 p.m. today. We do not have any appearances, correct?
Correct. None tonight.
Okay. The first item of business is to review and consider approving the minutes from the October 7th and October 14th, 2021 meetings. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 7th and October 14th, 2021 meetings? Commissioner Westberg?
Yes, I'm not responding to make a motion. I'm responding to suggest a slight change to the minutes for the October 14th meeting. So maybe we should take them separately.
All right, so
Just
we go to October 7th first. And then we can hear the changes, or does anybody have any changes that they want to make to the October 7th minutes as well?
No, I move we approve the minutes for the October 7th meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
Don Cohen, I'll second.
Okay. And there's a motion seconded by by Rory Westberg and a second by Don Cohen for the October 7th minutes. And for the October 14th minutes, Rory, what were the changes that you wanted to make?
It's just a clarification to the first bullet item under number 1 that starts with Commissioner Struck proposed adding an expansion to the native garden at Mercer Park to the 20-year list. So that part's fine. It's after that, the majority of the commissioners showed support. And then I would add, for including the project, but delaying the timing until after the completion of the proposed Mercerdale master plan.
I would agree with that change. Can I have a motion to accept the changes to the October 14th minutes?
Well, I'll move.
All right. The motion is moved by Rory Westberg, and do I have a second?
Don Cohen, I'll second as with that revision.
All right. And, okay, so we have made a motion to modify the October 14th minutes. Can we have a motion to approve those minutes for the October 14th meeting as modified, please?
I so move.
I'm Rory, and a second.
Don Cohen, second.
Thank you. All right, so the motion by Rory Westberg and a second by Don Cohen to approve the modified October 14th meeting minutes. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones, and will the city staff please conduct a roll call?
Chair McCarthy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Struck,
Aye.
Commissioner Cohen,
Aye.
Commissioner Birkenwald, Commissioner Westberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Markson,
Aye.
Commissioner Burstein.
Abstain.
All right, motions passed, and the minutes are approved. Okay, the second item of business is the pros plan review, chapter 4, and the 2023-2028 capital improvement program. We welcome City Manager Jesse Bond and consultant Steve Dew.
Good evening, Parks and Recreation Commission. Good to see you again. Again, my name is Jesse Bond. I'm the city manager, and I think all of you are aware I am assisting with the pros plan update. I have a number of staff joining tonight that will also be reporting. So let's get started. We have two big topics tonight. One is reviewing the revised draft chapter 4, which is your goals and objectives section, and we're going to start there. I suggested to Chair McCarthy earlier today that we should probably get through the goals discussion, take a break, and then pick up the park CIP discussion. So that's our tentative plan. I am going to screen share. Hopefully this. All right, let me just make one adjustment on my end. I delivered a version of this presentation last night to the Open Space Trust, and I was mentioning earlier that I couldn't see my screen. Do you guys have a big slide on your side? Yep, okay, we are there. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have two topics tonight, the chapter 4 goals and objectives, and then we'll be diving back into the parks 6-year CIP. Where I thought we might start tonight is just a look back at chapter 4. I think I've described it as the meat and potatoes of your pros plan. It really does provide the high level strategic direction for the park system over the next 6 to 10 years or more. In September, you looked at this document for the first time. We went through a pretty exhaustive review process. From there, we met with the Arts Council once and then went back a second time to discuss revisions. And we also presented the draft goals to the Open Space Conservancy Trust. So now we're back to you tonight and hoping to come as close as we can to a final draft. From here, we'll be handing it off to Steve Dew to lay out in plan format. This won't be your last chance if we need to make another revision, but we're hoping to get as close as we can this evening. So Steve and I have two objectives in particular that we wanted to work through. These are probably the two that need the most attention. And then I'll stop screen. I'm gonna have Steve talk about those. And then there's the matrix document that was in your packet with all of the other suggestions that I'd like to work through. So let's start here. And Steve, I will turn the floor over to you. Commissioners, if you're following along, this is goal 1, objective 1.10. And we kind of left it hanging out there for discussion. So Steve, may I hand the floor to you?
Thank you, Jesse, and good evening, everybody. Again, for the record, Steve Dew, Conservation Techniques. So yes, this is one goal in particular we wanted to just put back in front of the commission because it was noted in the draft as still under review. So it seems appropriate to have a little bit of a discussion about it. So it is in particular, or it is referring to the notion of service standards, and specifically the way objective 1.10 is preliminarily worded. It's around the idea of acres per thousand. So the notion is for every 1,000 people, there's an acre of park and open space land to accommodate the population. It's a fairly common metric that's used in park planning. But before I go into kind of a suggestion on this one, let me give you a little bit of background and give you some data about where the city is today. So first off, the notion of acres per thousand as a service standard, again, is an older one. It's been around for probably 30 some years. It's a blunt tool though, because it measures the quantity or the acreage of what you've got. But it doesn't really pay attention to or define where those acres are, who has access to those acres, what kinds of acres they are, what kind of condition they're in, what could be done in them. It's just a crude numeric that says, we've got a bucket of acres for a bucket of people, and that's how we're going to measure our system. So again, it's a blunt tool. It is something that was modeled after some older guidelines from the National Park and Recreation Association, the NRPA, but they've fallen out of favor for obvious reasons, I would think. And even the NRPA has said that jurisdictions should go toward more locally appropriate service standards that could include acres per thousand or this sort of metric, but also look at other things related to local need, your local land base, opportunity to purchase, and have just a more holistic approach. So the other thing about acres per thousand is it is good in some situations, and in particular, it's good for fast-growing jurisdictions or even suburban jurisdictions where they can use this metric to relate it to their park impact fee program and have a very clean way of saying, we're getting 1,000 new people a year. We've got to add more parks, and it's a simple way to manage and measure that. But given Mercer Island as an island, you're not expanding outward. Your population growth is modest, and you've got limited opportunity for purchasing new lands or purchasing them maybe even at the rate that your population is growing. So what I would suggest is reimagining the notion of standards to be one geared toward access, which is distribution, which is make sure that people across the island have reasonable access to a park or open space, which is noted already in the goals as objective 1.7. So it's the notion of serve the public with reasonable access defined as a half a mile provision of parks and open space. And secondly, use the notion of an acquisition land strategy to better refine where you might need additional property to fill gaps, or how to approach maybe the idea of additional waterfront property. So to me, as kind of the consultant on the team, I would suggest an approach that's less tied to numerics and one that's more tied toward actual on the ground reality and just making sure that people have access. But to that, I also want to just give you some sense of where the city is today in terms of those numerics, just to give you a sense. So in that little chart off to the bottom, it represents some data from the NRPA, again, National Recreation and Park Association. And they do annual surveys across the nation, and agencies self-report data. And basically, it's a tool for us and other agencies to look at how they're tracking relative to other communities in aggregate as median or even within population brackets. So the table identifies the columns for all agencies, which is median data for all reporting agencies, and then also for agencies that are between 20 and 50,000 in size. And then that final column is Mercer Island. So just looking at that second row, which is acres of parkland per 1,000, which is what I'm talking about, you can see that all agencies at a median are just about at 10 acres per 1,000. For a population range of 20 to 50,000, it's about 10 acres per 1,000. Mercer Island's at 18.5, and that's parks and open space. But if we were to segment that to just parks, it would be 10.1 acres per 1,000 today, and 8.4 additional for open space lands. So just in looking at where Mercer Island is in relation to national data sets, you're doing quite well in terms of the numeric of providing access to parks and open space. Again, doesn't say where they are, who has access to them, or any of that. It's just a quick check to see where you are. So don't feel the need to dwell too much more on this. I just wanted to offer that little bit of data and perspective to offer my thoughts on this particular objective. And again, my recommendation would be to delete objective 1.10 and rely on the existing objectives of 1.7, which is the distribution and the land acquisition strategy. Alternatively, there should be a discussion tonight about what makes sense from your perspective, whether you want to keep a numeric in there, whether you want to marry it with the other objectives. So I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on the notion of service standards.
So Chair McCarthy, I'll stop screen sharing. I thought this would be a good time to break and talk about 1.10.
Great. Commissioner Cohen.
I just had a question, Don Cohen. I just had a question, Steve, on your little chart on the bottom. Did you say that the numbers for all agencies and for 20,000 to 50,000 were just parkland and didn't include open space, but the Mercer Island one included open space? Is that what you said?
No, I did not clarify that, because one thing to note about the national data set is I referenced it being self-reporting. So some agencies report in their own way and classify land differently. This is a roll-up of all of their park and open space lands. So it is kind of at the apples to apples comparison, but you'd really have to dive deeper into the data to actually validate that.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I may have misunderstood what you said. Thanks.
Commissioner Westberg.
Yeah, is my mic on? Can you hear me? Yeah, I had actually put a note next to that goal that said recommend dropping it, because I felt that it didn't really, it's not really a goal in the sense that we have a lot of control over the data that would have to go into computing that, acquiring new parkland or any control over the growth of the population of the island. I did like, and I believe it was Commissioner Struck's idea to potentially substitute for that metric the idea of a goal that addressed overall satisfaction with the park system. So something that would say, maintain a minimum overall satisfaction level of 92% or 93%, pick the number. I don't know what the appropriate one would be, but that would give you some feedback or some target at least to show that overall the system is responding to the needs of the community.
Yeah, I think that that's a good measurable metric for sure. All right, Vice Chair Struck.
Yes, thank you, Peter Struck. Yeah, a couple of thoughts. First, Steve, kind of on the table of data there where you're comparing Mercer Island to kind of the national statistics, you know, I think our last PROS plan, you know, compared ourselves to, you know, neighboring communities. And actually, I think it was 2016, updated those numbers for a presentation I did. And I think what you would, the takeaway you would get is that we're probably kind of average as opposed to really good or really bad type of thing. So that's just kind of a comment. But I think that I'm in agreement that dropping 1.1 or 1.10, excuse me, as it's currently worded, the metric of, you know, standard of acres per population measurement. I think I would suggest perhaps just moving it, and I think that this was done in the last PROS plan, as just providing the data in the body of one of the chapters, just as, and it's really more, I think, not only an absolute number, but also a trend. You know, how are you kind of moving compared to other, you know, neighboring communities? I think it would be just as valuable. But I think that, you know, realistically, given kind of the mature nature of our park system and open space, as well as kind of how much vacant land there is, et cetera, I think we all know that this ratio probably will decline over time as population probably grows faster than acquisition of park acreage. So I'm not sure that how helpful that is, but it is one standard. But I would second Rory's suggestion of we should have some kind of metric in here that says, you know, if and I'm thinking this kind of this community satisfaction rating is one way, because it's easy to measure. And since we're planning to do I think going forward, and as we have in the past, this 2-year community survey, it's an easy question to include. And clearly, if, you know, parks are getting to be overused, people aren't feeling so good about them, it'll show up in that just as much as this other ratio. So for that reason, I would be happy to substitute that in. And I also think the other one, I think it was 1.7, or the other one about within a half mile is another good gauge. I'm not sure how well we do on that right out of the box, but I think that's a good one as well. Thank you.
All right, can we get a thumbs up, thumbs down to modifying 1.10 to change it, instead of having the minimum standard, change it to be a metric of level of satisfaction with park users? Okay.
Well, what's the level, Don Cohen? What level are we?
I think that's a good question. Do we want to say 90% because that is a round number, more than 90%? Do we want it to be or higher? 90% or higher?
Yeah, this is Don Cohen. I'd like to hear from the city manager of whether that's, you know, a sort of a feasible thing to have 93% or something. I don't remember exactly how that survey looks.
We haven't done it in a little while. We'll do it again in 2022. I think I'm indifferent really between 90, 92%. I think satisfaction, attaining something above 90% is pretty darn respectable. So I might point you to 90%. I screen shared because I was typing as you were talking, trying to get a sense of the correct language for this.
All right. So, Peter, do you have a suggestion of wording?
I think that what is written there is fine. Maintain a minimum overall community satisfaction rating for parks above 90. Again, would it be park system, parks and open spaces? I mean, that would be my only question. I think that I looked at one of the more recent surveys and the park surveys, and there is a kind of overall satisfaction question asked. Maybe it was the one from 2020, and it was at 93%. So I think I've seen other ones that are kind of in that low 90s. So I think if we had 90%, which is a nice round number, but I think also that would, if it starts dropping into the 80s, I think that would suggest to me at least that things are kind of, people have the perception things are slipping a bit.
I agree. Does anybody else have any comments about this? All right, but before we go on to the next part of this, I just want to acknowledge that Commissioner Birkenwald is in the meeting with us. Welcome. All right, so do we need anything else for that, Jesse, or is that enough information for you?
Not sure if she's available, but from my perspective, I think the language that we've offered and you've thumbed up is appropriate and works.
All right, well, let's go on to the next point then. Thank you.
All right. Merrill.
I'm just gonna pop in. There might be some power issues at City Hall that our city manager is experiencing. So I'm gonna just give me a second. I'll pull up the PowerPoint and I'll drive it while Steve speaks, unless Jesse pops on, but just give me 1 sec.
And while we're waiting for that to show up on screen, let me just give you a little prelude to what the next item is. So it's related to an objective that's in goal 3, which is the goal for environment and sustainability. And the objective is a newer addition related to impervious surfaces. And I'll leave the rest until we get it on screen. And Merrill, if you're getting in trouble, I can put mine up also.
I think I'm there. I just,
Jody, this is Don Cohen. Can I ask a question? On the
Yes.
last one that we thumbed up, did we add and open space or something like that? Or did we leave it the way it was on there that Jesse had written?
You're right, Don. We did not clarify which part of the parks it was.
Yeah, because I'd agree with Peter Struck to say parks and open space or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that as well.
And I'll make a note of that. So it's park and open space system.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so for the impervious surface.
Yeah, so here we go on screen.
okay.
So thank you, Merrill. So again, this is objective 3.15, and it was one that was added within the last month or so as the commission has digested these goals and objectives. And for me, as I have gone back through, I really just wanted to get some clarification and confirmation from the commission about the intent and focus of this particular objective. So the objective, as is written, limit the creation of new impervious surfaces where feasible to promote the environmental benefits of natural surfaces, evaluate opportunities to reduce or decommission existing impervious surfaces that are no longer needed or in use. And the reason I want to clarify is it seems as though the intent was, from those discussions we've had, about the focus on the impact to open space. And also from public feedback, I know that there have been a couple of members of the public who have noted impervious surface as an issue, as an encroachment, or as a way to manage the growth or development of the overall park and open space system. So I just wanted to bring this back as a way to touch on this and also offer some data just to give you some more context. So Merrill, for the next slide. Thank you. The graphics might be a little bit hard to read, but I'll walk you through them. But before I touch on the numerics, the numbers there, I just want to reference that when the term impervious surface is used, it includes a lot of things. It includes the obvious stuff of parking areas and sport courts and structures and things where water doesn't flow through, right? But it also includes things you might not think of as impervious, things like trails. And those trails could be paved, but they could also be earthen or gravel. And the fact that they're impervious is because of compaction of the soil. And, you know, the state has regulations about what is and what isn't impervious. So when it comes to permitting a project, even a soft surface trail is treated as an impervious surface, just an FYI. Additionally, synthetic sport courts, or sport fields, I should say, are impervious. So it's not natural grass where the water flows through. There's under drainage, there's water management systems under the turf. And again, from a permitting perspective, they're treated as impervious. And even permeable pavement, like you would see with the porous asphalt that gets put in, or even pavers, those could be considered pervious, but they need to be maintained and vacuumed and cleaned at some frequency. Otherwise, they're also impervious. So just that's kind of just some background to frame the term impervious. I went back through and took a look at the overall park and open space system, as well as the specific elements within the park system that could be deemed as impervious. And again, this is just context, just a little bit of data, just to have a conversation. So the first chart on the far left is the overall city. So the city, Mercer Island, 6 square miles, about 4,000 acres. 11.8% of the city is parks and open space. One, that's pretty great. So you should be proud of that. And it gets to the prior conversation of, you know, having good access to a fair amount of land base for parks and open space. So of that 11.8%, that's about 480 acres. The middle graphic there splits out that 480 acres between the spaces that are natural or pervious, so open spaces, treat areas, etc., and those areas that have amenities on them that would be considered or classified as impervious. So of the 480 acres, 8% is impervious. And that's about 38 acres, give or take, of the total park system that could be classified in one fashion as impervious. Then the third chart breaks down what that 8% really is. And this is where it gets a little fuzzy on screen, so I apologize for that. But the takeaways are the top 2 bars in green are trails. So 36% of the total 8% is trails. And then toward the bottom, where it's kind of gold and gray, you've got turf, sport fields, and parking. So those 3 categories represent 70% of the impervious surface in the parks system. So short story is less than 30% of the overall park system that has improvements on it is everything else. It's your sport courts, it's your restrooms, it's your other structures, your playgrounds, etc. So again, I'm just trying to step you through kind of the numbers here and say that if you look at impervious surface and then subtract out the trails, the parking, and the turf sport courts, you're left with about 10 acres of everything else that's developed in the park system that's classified as impervious. So again, I'm just trying to kind of walk you through some data here. Before I move forward, I know that Commissioner Cohen has his hand up.
Yeah, Don Cohen. I am perplexed now by what you said about the definition of impervious surface. This is the first time I've ever thought about that gravel trails, that earthen trails, compacted, you say, are included. I mean, I'm going back to the years I was on the planning commission, and impervious meant, you know, colloquially impervious, you know, and maybe things have changed. That was a long time ago. So I agree with you. We've got to be very careful about what we do here, or we have to define this much more carefully, because if I don't understand this, then there are going to be other people who don't understand it. And if we leave something like this in there, there's a mistype word here. It says services rather than surfaces in the first line, but that's a small matter. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for that. And Meryl, if you could go to the next slide. It kind of gets to the point that Commissioner Cohen brought up, which is about the need to clarify the intent. So again, as I read the objective, you know, my little planner red flag went off and said, this could be used against the city's need for providing additional park amenities. And my comment earlier about the acres per thousand metric is that one thing that the city should pay attention to is that as the city continues to provide its parks, and you've got some population growth, but you still have visitors coming here, you're going to have continued pressure on the big workhorse parks, the Luther Burbank, the Aubrey Davis, and a few others. And managing for that pressure on your park system will be an important management issue going forward. So there may be a time down the road where the city wants to bleed off some of the pressure at some of those big workhorse parks to other sites. And if your language precludes development based on the notion of impervious, then you might be hamstringing yourself. So again, as a consultant outsider, I'm just offering my perspectives. And what I've suggested on this slide is some wording that potentially could be agreed upon, or feel free to edit or change. But what I was aiming at was refocusing the notion of impervious to more of protection of open space and protection of the green space, so you're not encroaching active uses into open spaces. And maybe that was the intent all along. But what I've got on screen, as you can read, is within city-owned space, prevent the encroachment of active use areas and minimize the installation of hardscape park amenities through low-impact design solutions to maintain the natural conditions of open space. And then also, as was in the previous wording, evaluate opportunities to reduce, decommission existing impervious, such as trail segments that are no longer in use. So again, it's a two-part piece like it was previously, but the first piece really tries to define it toward protecting and managing open space lands rather than park lands based on classification. So I just wanted to offer that to see if there's thought or reaction to this wording. And I'll turn it back to the chair, McCarthy.
All right, well, let's hear first from Commissioner Westberg.
Sorry to interrupt, Commissioner Westberg. Is it helpful to leave this proposed definition up, or should we just discuss amongst ourselves?
I'd leave it up. That's my feeling.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
let me
agree.
know if there's a good time to take it off.
Okay. First of all, there objective 3.6 has wording in it that says pursue opportunities to limit or reduce impervious surfaces. So we don't need that language as well as a separate goal, I think. So I just take note of that. But secondly, I think, Steve, it was very helpful to see your chart showing the actual acreage involved and to have the definition defined. Based on that discussion, I think that your amended language captures what I understood to be the objective here, which was to ensure that we protect open space areas and that we set a very high bar at the design stage for adding any hardscapes to parks. And I think that's well captured within the amended wording that you have proposed.
Thank you, Commissioner Westberg. Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen. Thanks, Rory, for pointing out that language in 3.6 also. I still have some concern about the use of the term impervious in both of these, both 3.6 and the suggested language here because of the definitions that Steve went through. Is it wrong to call it hardscape like you did at the beginning of the new 315 rather than impervious? I know this is, I understand. I'm in favor of the substantive desire on this, but because of the definitions, like Steve said before, it's sort of, somebody could use it to mean, okay, we don't want to add any more trails in such and such area unless they're non-compacted dirt or bark. So I guess I'm still in a quandary a little bit.
If I may respond, yes, I would take out the ambiguity of the term impervious surface from this, and that's a good catch. And I would replace it with hardscape or something to reference a paved, compacted, or otherwise water repellent sort of surface.
Commissioner Burstein?
This is Paul Burstein. I'd also recommend taking out the example of trail segments because I remember from the surveys, it seemed like there was sufficient demand for more trails. And this suggests that we may move in the other direction and reduce trails.
This is Jody McCarthy. I agree with you, Paul. I think that our example should use something besides trail segments. The original example just said decommissioned existing surfaces that are no longer needed. And so I feel like we'll just take out that comma such as trail segments. And I also agree that we take out the impervious surface in 3.6 as well to make the document streamlined. The other thing that I want to note is that Commissioner Markson has had to leave the meeting at this time for Merrill. Okay, does anybody else have any more thoughts? Oh, Don, is your hand still up?
No, I do have another thought. Thank you.
Okay.
I sort of liked Steve's definitional use, but is there a definition section at the beginning of this whole thing somewhere or not?
We haven't contemplated one,
Okay.
but we could certainly add one. It's not uncommon.
Well, I mean, I liked your language and I won't try to repeat it because it captured what I thought of as impervious. I don't know whether other people feel that too. To have to say it a couple of times, both in 3.6 and here the same way, maybe more words than are useful unless you just go with hardscape or something like that. I don't know, but I do agree with deleting the word impervious in both of those for the reasons we've discussed.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Vice Chair Struck.
Yes, thank you, Peter Struck. So just to confirm, so in 3.6, are we leaving in pursue opportunities, but just changing the terminology of impervious surfaces to hardscape or something to that effect? Is that correct?
Peter, this is Commissioner Westberg. My thought was we didn't need that language in 3.6 and a separate goal that essentially addresses the same point.
Yeah, I think we take it out of 3.6 and make that the hardscape be 3.15.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think it hurts to kind of double down, but that's fine. So going to the kind of the amended 3.15 that's on the screen. So Steve, what I'm a little bit confused is, so we start out with, it says within city-owned space. So that basically means all city property, prevent encroachment of active use areas and minimize installation of hardscape park amenities through solutions to maintain the natural conditions of open space. So question, the term open space there at the end of that sentence does not refer to parks versus open space. It just means kind of more generically open space. Is that correct?
Actually, good catch in the first 4 words there, because I missed a word. It should say within city-owned open space. So it is defining it more tightly to the open space as classified through the Parks and Recreation Plan.
Okay, so there, I would prefer to have it expanded to include, all spaces. And again, I think as we've talked, there's going to be a balance in here, but I think what we're trying to do here is raise awareness to the issue that the community, I think, would prefer to see, in general, less hardscape types of things. But again, there's going to be a balance, and clearly sports fields was one good example of that. But I wouldn't want to, at least in my opinion, narrow it to just strictly open space.
Good, fair point. So if I could just rephrase it, then that opening phrase would be within city-owned property, within city-owned land. Like, what terminology would you recommend?
I might defer to Commissioner Cohen. He's probably the best wordsmith.
Oh, no, I would just go, this is Don Cohen. I just go with parks and open space. That's what this whole document's talking about. I wouldn't make it all city property, because that's not within our bailiwick, So if parks and open space work from Peter's point of view, it would work from my point of view.
I would concur. This is Peter Struck.
Great, thank you.
All right, so, okay, Marie Bender has a comment.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that using the term hardscape may be going a little too far in the other direction. And I'm thinking about like the perimeter of Pioneer Park, which has historically been used for parking, but it's not got any, there's no cement, there's no tar, but it certainly wouldn't be what we would want to be allowing in our open spaces. So I totally agree that impervious surface has got too much terminology in use, but I just kind of wonder if there's something that's in between impervious and hardscape.
I'm struggling to come up with a different term. Maybe if Jason can jump in.
Good evening, Jason Kennedy, Chief of Operations. I am also struggling with a different term between hardscape and impervious. I think we all understand the discussion around it this evening and the intent behind this discussion. It's just finding the right descriptive word to match. I was going to jump on the last conversation and make sure we said parks and open space, not city-owned spaces, because we have a number of utility locations that would be problematic for some of this application, but we can find that. So based off the discussion tonight, it sounds like the hardscape is the direction to go. If we come up with a different descriptive word, we can certainly run with it and present it to the commission. But I think I don't have another one in the moment at this point in time.
Commissioner Cohen?
Don Cohen. Steve, could you say again those like 3 or 4 categories when you were struggling to find a definition of impervious stuff before? Because maybe we can put a parenthetical or drop a footnote or something so that you don't have to say it twice.
Yes, and I'm glad we're recording this, because I would have to go back to the recording to just double check. But I use terms like hardscape, non-permeable, water repellent. I think those were the 3 terms I used, but none of them were necessarily eloquent.
Because this is Don Cohen again. I'd be okay with something where there was a parenthetical after it or dropping a footnote that said e.g. and then put your 3 things. That way you're not doing a really hard definition of it, but you're giving the context for it that might there are people in the public, and Peter knows some of them. Daniel Thompson is one who, if he doesn't see the word impervious in here, he's going to say, Peter, what did you do? You sold out on the impervious surface issue. But if at least the concept is there, maybe not with little different words, we're okay. Because I agree that with Marie, we're not in any disagreement here. We're just struggling not inadvertently to create a problem.
Understood. And given the dialogue, it seems as though the proposed language is going in the right direction. And what I would recommend at this stage is I would, after this meeting, just go back to the recording just to catch some of the words I did use, and edit this based on this conversation, because you will see this again next month. This isn't the final decision on the objective language. So if maybe we can get generalized thumb up about the direction of this language, I can clean it up as a next step.
Okay, great. So let's do a thumbs up, thumbs down. Looks like Peter, you're good or not good? Okay, we're all good. So we can move on to the next section of the goals.
I'll turn it back to Jessie since she's back.
I think it was just a perfect theme for tonight. My power strip blew up, everything went down. Police had to come help move my desk so I could plug in a new one, and I'm back. All right.
Well, by the way,
Patience.
this Don Cohen, when you were away part of that time, one of the clarifications that Steve made on the ambiguity and the definition of impervious was much appreciated by me and other people, because it came as a surprise in significant part.
Good. Well, Merrill and Steve and team will catch me up on the previous discussions I just missed. What I'd like to do now is flip over to our matrix, because I think that's where I'm picking up the meeting at. Give me a moment.
Can I, Jody, this is Don Cohen. Can I make one comment on this before we go to the matrix?
This is 3.15, is that what still, or?
No, you were moving on. I had something on 8.2 I wanted to ask about.
I think we're still on the goals, aren't we?
Oh,
We're still on the
okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize.
That's okay. I secretly hoped you'd made it through this entire document while I was gone, so I guess not. All right. Everyone can see this beautiful document? You may remember it from, all right, good. So we're at item number 50, and I'm going to work from this document, although I can pull up the actual goals and objective if it's helpful. So goal 1, objective 1.1. This is the language, the text that's been added. This is regarding protection of parks and open space, is evaluate the transfer of some or all open space areas to the Open Space Conservancy Trust. So this is circled back, it's had several cycles. The trust has been talking about it. We talked about it at the last meeting. Is that the language that we want to add?
Should we be just doing a thumbs up, thumbs down for you on these?
Absolutely, unless you'd like to discuss.
Does anybody have any comments, or we'll just do thumbs up on this? I don't see any comments, so let's do thumbs up. Oh, sorry, Marie Bender.
Right. I did want to add, I mean, this was discussed quite a bit last night. And where the trust board came out is we really would like to see an evaluation of how it might be done and why it might be done. We're not at a point where we, are behind the idea. We want to understand what the idea might mean. So we just want to make sure that I think that's the direction everybody's going, but that's certainly where the trust board is hoping to go.
Great. And that was part of the reason we left the word evaluate in there. not to make the assumption that it was automatic.
And this is Commissioner Westberg, and this would be done by staff and the city attorney, an internal evaluation.
That's correct. And remember, the goals and objectives provide strategic direction. The city council then, along with your input, staff input, actually sets work plans based on a 2-year cycle. So as I was telling the trust last night, I don't know that this is something that we jump right into in 2022, but possibly 2023, the council would say, yes, resource this. And I know the council is interested as a whole in objective 1.1. So I imagine it's going to be added to our work plan. All right, so I saw a thumbs up previously. I think still stands. Okay. We've already talked about objective 1.0. That's when I lost my connection. So I'll get back with the staff on what you discussed there. This is on item number 52 in your matrix. This is a proposed addition from Chair McCarthy. And I think you guys can see it there. It's a gender equity parity goal. The parity is with the Title IX provisions that the school district adheres to regarding equity and athletic facilities.
Vice Chair Struck.
Thank you, Peter Struck. So Jesse, I think you maybe just partially answered. So my question on this one was that, provide parity, and maybe it's just kind of the potential awkwardness of the way it's worded, but my question was parity to what or to who? Is it, if it's parity to Title IX provisions, then I think, it seems like there's a lot of extra language in there that could be simplified. I don't know, I just kind of struggle to kind of understand, exactly what we were trying to get at here.
I'm open to a revision, and here's what I will just say simply is the school district has to meet Title IX, in providing athletic resources. The city is not directly subject to Title IX, although we try to adhere to it. And so that's what we thought we should write it down, right? This is pretty important.
Jesse, this is Commissioner Westberg. I have some alternative language.
Awesome.
On that particular one, and it would be simplified to say, ensure that the allocation and use of athletic facilities, amenities, and field space aligns with Title X provisions, Title IX provisions, pardon me, prohibiting discrimination or disparity in sports, recreation, and athletic facilities.
Commissioner Westberg, you want to take one more pass at that? Sorry.
Sure. And I just would ask Commissioner McCarthy if that expresses the idea that she was trying to get.
Yes, that does. And that's a lot cleaner. Thank you. So can you please read that out again one more time?
Yeah. Ensure that the allocation and use of athletic facilities, amenities, and field space aligns with Title IX provisions prohibiting discrimination or disparity in sports, recreation, and athletic facilities.
What do we think?
I like it. Vice Chair Struck, you have your hand up still. Did you have another?
Oh, sorry.
All right, thumbs up. I did not see. If you have a comment, then otherwise we're going to say thumbs up. Okay, next one.
All right, this is moving on to goal 3. This is number 3.5. This was a recommendation from the trust. And Marie, actually last night there was a slight modification suggested. This was, do you recall?
Right, we just wanted to expand it with the thought of it's an educational opportunity also. So maybe say best practice in forest management and environmental education.
All right. Any comments, or else we will consider this a thumbs up? Great. Okay, next one.
All right, we're moving along here. Let me fix this. This was also from the trust. They wanted to make sure parking was referenced as an amenity since many open space areas are short of parking. And so I simply dropped it in to 3.2. I just added the word parking. And you might recall when we talked about the goals previously, we took out a bunch of references to amenities and tried to simplify it. So that was.
Vice Chair Struck.
Yeah, so by adding this, are we implying that then we're wanting to put parking lots in our open spaces? Is that kind of what, I mean, that's the depth, or what my takeaway is that what is meant?
Where appropriate.
Or put parking at the bottom instead of at the top of the examples?
Well, no, I don't think that
But,
really.
Yeah, but then you can.
I mean, I guess where appropriate, I mean, kind of softens it up. I mean, I wonder if, it should be, back somewhere in section 1, what talks about access, because parking is really access oriented. So, but I guess I just didn't want to send the strong message that we're prioritizing that we need to, have
Right.
parking lots. I think you would find probably some amount of community discussion on that issue.
Right.
I'd like Marie to chime in here because the trust has been talking about the opposite issue, which is in the absence of parking, people are putting their cars in places they should not and actually damaging our open space areas.
Mhm.
Marie, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, we are struggling to figure out how to balance the fact that we want people in our parks, and mostly they have to drive to the park. But, Pioneer Park is pretty constrained around the edges. And other places like the 53rd Street open space it's dangerous to park there. So there's an acknowledged need to be able to provide parking to provide access, but exactly how to do that is hard. But we certainly don't want to imply that we want parking lots. We do not want parking lots.
All right, Commissioner Westberg.
Let's see. I was just going to say that parking, I kind of share Commissioner Struck's concern, but parking doesn't necessarily have to mean that we're going to go in and start paving. It could be managing parking better, particularly like Marie, I'm thinking around the northwest quadrant of Pioneer Park. It could be striping parking in the street on the west side of Pioneer Park, where you don't add any new parking surfaces, but encourage people to park and not pull up over the curb and damage park resources. So it's a management issue as much as it is a structural issue, I think.
Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen, I agree with Peter's point, and maybe it's the placement of the word parking. What if we deleted parking where it is right now? So you had provide appropriate public access, e.g. trails, viewpoints, within open space areas to support passive recreation, comma, and parking, comma, where appropriate. That way you're not linking the parking is not going to be within the open space, but you're going to work toward providing parking in an appropriate fashion. Again, I think it's where it got dropped in as much as anything else, and the juxtaposition with open space that caused a reaction.
Thank you. Vice Chair Struck.
Yeah, thank you, Peter Struck. Yeah, I like Commissioner Cohen's suggestion with respect to the placement, and then the additional wording of where appropriate and feasible. I think again, requires some thoughtfulness there, and lastly, I think that if there's a parking enforcement issue, that's something that's totally kind of separate, I think, from this discussion here.
All right, so if there's no more comments, then we will consider this wording to be the accepted wording. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Cohen. Oh, okay. So let's go on to the next change.
All right, this is just to reflect a note that the trust wanted to make sure that we had adaptive management related to climate change in the objectives. And I just noted here that we do in 3.6 and 3.7. So I would recommend we go to the next one.
Okay.
You just tackled 3.15. So let's move on. Okay, this is from the Arts Council, and I'll just summarize. They had initially suggested that in objective 5.4 and 5.6, we do not recognize adult recreation. We did not, and they wanted to add the word adults. We did not add it. And the reason is we are trying to focus our work. So currently in 5.4, we have youth and teens referenced. In 5.6, we reference seniors, that's by design. And then in 5.2, we have this, which is a little more global. So the staff did not recommend picking up that change. And I honestly did not have a chance to circle back with the Arts Council. I wasn't at that meeting. But does anyone disagree with the staff approach?
Vice Chair Struck.
Yeah, so I think Jesse, maybe right at the end there, you kind of got where I was headed. So as I looked at these objectives, and quite frankly, I'm looking kind of at the the full chapter 4 document as opposed to this one. But my thought was, is just as you mentioned, so you have 5.2 is really kind of the global goal, enhance diversity of recreation programs, globally. And then you really have 5.3, which is water-oriented recreation, what we call out. 5.4, which is youth and teen, whole family participation, and then 5.6, which is seniors. And to me, those are 5.3, 5.4, and 5.6 are all just really subset of 5.2. And I think if we wanted to highlight those, I would almost put those as kind of sub goals, if you will, as opposed to separate goals. Because my reaction is, well, what groups have we left out that maybe should be in there? I didn't go through that exercise, but I guess that's kind of where I would head.
So I would partially agree with that, except I would also say we are trying to drive our recreation division to be market focused, and the market will change over time. And we know the market right now is for those items, and in terms of where the gaps are and the needs. It's youth and teens, it's seniors. We certainly got a big push for water-oriented activities. I can restructure it to be sub-bullets. That would be easy. Whatever the commission's pleasure is.
And if I could jump in, I mean, as I kind of think about it here on the fly, just going with goal 5.2, I guess I'm, happy with that. It's kind of like you just go with one at the top, which is 5.2, or if you want to start, adding in all these kind of more narrow focuses, then, that's fine too. But I think they should all then be sub bullets.
All right. Can I get some thumbs up for support of making those sub bullets?
Okay. Okay, let's move on then. This is 5.12. I think we butchered this one to death at the last meeting, and Vice Chair Struck helped us out with a proposed revision, which is really hard to read. So let me just do something real fast here. That 5.2 look okay to everybody now? Yes?
Yes.
All right.
This is Jake. I can't seem to find a raise my hand here, and I've had to be in and out because of some other, trying to do two things at once and not very well on anything, but I wanted to talk briefly about safety and our obligation, as I see as the Parks and Rec Commission and running a parks program, to have the safety of the participants be a consideration. And as you know, we're caught between a rock and a hard place about the BMX or the bike skills area, because on the one hand, it's a use that's been established, but it's also a use that's been established on some property we own, to put it, that way. And as uses and things evolve, I think that the safety of the participants should be considered, because that's one of the factors that's caused us to put a moratorium of use on the bike skills area. And that's, the users aren't happy. The people that are all about Mercerdale or Upper Luth or Burbank Park are very upset about it. And we're in the unfortunate position of being in the target zone. So I think this is one place, and there are a couple others where as a goal, the concept of user safety should be a consideration. And I may well have missed it. I've gone through the materials that I've seen, and if I've missed something, my bad. But I suggest that to be considered.
Jake, was that a general comment, or was that specific here to 5.12? Just so I'm clear.
Yeah, 0.12.
Okay.
More than anything else, that I probably would have tried to raise my hand earlier had I not been put, between a rock and a hard place by something else, another city business. So anyway, it would belong here and may belong elsewhere. I don't know.
Commissioner Westberg?
Well, just to follow up on Jake's comments, safety is mentioned generically, I believe, in a couple of goals where we speak to safety being one of the overarching factors in managing our park and open space. So it isn't ignored in this document.
Well, I wasn't suggesting it was ignored. What I was suggesting that it be properly considered, and Rory, I bow to you, to your view and understanding of these things is greater than mine, and so if it's the commission's feeling that that's adequately addressed, I'm good with that.
Well, we should stay alert to that and just make sure as we go through this next round of revisions and then read this document again.
Mm-hmm. Vice Chair Struck.
Yes, thank you. So to the issue of safety, and Commissioner Westberg is correct that it is mentioned in a few places. One, as I reviewed this, one goal, and if we're getting off track here, let me know, and I could just submit it. But 1.3 at the second sentence, talking about levels of service. The second sentence says, including accompanying standards for maintenance and operations. And you might want to just say maintenance, operations and safety. And so we could accent or highlight the issue of safety in that goal as well.
That's a good change if you want the staff perspective. So I'm here now in the goals document. If there's support, it would look like this.
Also, while you were away, Jesse, we struck in 3.6, we took out the pursue opportunities to limit or reduce impervious surfaces to streamline and make sure that the document all works together.
Okay, I'll pick that up. Does this change look okay to everybody? I think it looks good on our end. Yes. Okay. I'll keep that one. And then I think it was yes on this 5.2.
Yes.
Okay. All right, this is number 59 in the matrix. This is from the Arts Council, a pretty minor change. They just wanted to add arts, performance, and events to 6.3.
I have a comment.
Commissioner Cohen?
Don Cohen, and this is not a comment on that addition, but when I read through this again, this is again on item log number 59, section 6.3. It seemed to me that opportunities for integrating arts and culture into parks and open space areas may be perfectly fine for some open space areas and less fine for other ones. So what I was thinking of is in the fifth line of that, after the word including, putting a comma where feasible and appropriate, comma, through permanent and temporary public art installations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because there may be, it may be inappropriate to have a public art, however you define that, in on the Ravine Trail in Pioneer Park. Maybe not, but.
Good point. Vice Chair Struck?
Thank you. Commissioner Cohen is reading my mind tonight. In my notes, you have exactly the same comment of adding, either when appropriate or as appropriate and where feasible, et cetera. So his suggestion is spot on.
Perfect. All right, that's. Do you have another comment, Commissioner Cohen, or that was your other one?
No, sorry.
Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Okay, this was discussed previously. The Arts Council asked that we add an objective that reflects the facility, venue, space component of the arts and culture plan. And this PROS plan incorporates, it's actually in an appendix, the comprehensive arts and culture plan. So we didn't want to just copy over all of those goals. And we did not make the change, but I point out that objective 6.2 says we support the priorities of the Mercer Island Arts Council and the goals and initiatives of the comprehensive arts and culture plan. So I didn't make a change there. And I just wanted to run that by all of you.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. This is also from the Arts Council. They were asking where the Creative Arts Districts item is. That was a specific, it's also from the Arts and Culture Plan. It was a work item that got suspended. So it's covered already. I don't recommend adding something that specific here, but it should be picked up with the council as a potential future work item. So I didn't make any changes.
Okay.
We will relay this information back to the Arts Council so they know the decisions that we made. Okay, I'll keep going then. Also from the Arts Council, objective 7.3, they wanted to add, you may recall that we reworked 7.3 at our last meeting, and they've suggested we add the words "and community organizations." I think technically community organizations falls within that group of public-private nonprofit, but maybe not. They thought we should add that. I don't think it changes the intent.
I agree. I don't think it changes the intent either.
Shall we accept that?
Yes.
All right. Moving on, my thanks. Here, let me fix this. Again to Vice Chair Struck. This was another one we didn't quite get finished on the last meeting. 8.2. This was the resources statement. So Vice Chair Struck suggested provide sufficient financial resources through the city's budgeting process to ensure a vibrant and well-maintained parks and recreation system.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes, this is Don Cohen. I noticed that this is limited to the budgeting process. It doesn't say and other funding sources. I see that section 8.3 talks about pursuing alternative funding for acquisition and development, but not necessarily as broadly as this. So I'd be interested in Peter's thoughts on this and anybody else's. I wrote down provide sufficient financial resources through the city's budgeting process and other funding sources to ensure a vibrant, et cetera, et cetera. But
I wonder if we should, the budgeting process should be all encompassing. So if we're going to spend any money, no matter where it comes from, it should roll up in the city's budget. So let's take a look at Commissioner Cohen. What was the other?
8.3.
Oh. So 8.3, you guys can save me from myself here. Alternative funding options and dedicated revenues, that would still roll up through the city's budgeting process. So we could, and I don't know, any thoughts on?
Where do grants and things come? What is that? So, or is this just?
Yeah, so 8.8, what 8.2 was supposed to say is your objective is fund a well-maintained parks and recreation system through whatever means. You know, using the city's, yeah.
Is that aspirational? I mean, it's an aspirational goal. Because it's up to the council to do that.
Well, it's
so
also,
does it become their goal?
Yeah, I mean, it's our goal. It's our citywide goal.
Okay.
Commissioner Struck?
Yes, thank you, Peter Struck. You know, regarding Commissioner Cohen's suggestion about adding in other sources or something to that, I mean, I'm fine with that. I think it perhaps expands a little bit, but, you know, because again, I'm not sure how many community members would know specifically that the budgeting process is all encompassing or not, but be that as may, I do think that 8.3 has a different focus. I think 8.2 is kind of really, it's focused primarily on the existing assets that we have in our parks and rec system. And I think 8.3 more specifically looks at, well, how he looks at acquisition and development, which is probably a little bit to the 8.2, but I think it's really more the acquisition aspect. And I think that should be have a separate place just for to ensure that you know, we capture that idea, which is again throughout this whole document, that you know, when and where feasible, that, you know, we would look to expand the park system as appropriate.
All right, so it sounds like we have a, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Cohen, I think, was it you that had the alternative language here?
Well, I've got two alternatives now. And because in reading this, I thought that what Peter's language was trying to get to is, okay, city, you better come up with the money from city sources, but now because of city budgeting process, that's not the way it reads. But that may not be, you know, Peter wasn't that hard on it. I would say either delete through the city's budgeting process, either delete that or add and other funding sources after the word process. But I don't feel real strongly about this, but it caught my eye.
So that's what it looks like without the words, the city's budgeting process. I'm sorry, Commissioner Cohen, you had a second option that I didn't catch.
Well, the second option was the first one that I mentioned a minute ago, and just to insert and other funding sources after the word process in line 4. But that's inconsistent with your description, Jesse, of the budgeting process as being all encompassing.
I wonder if it's just this.
Marie Bender has a comment or a question.
Yeah, this was something else we talked about last night, and I'm not sure, and this is more of an overall comment, but someplace else in the document, there is a sort of laundry list of sources of other funding that included the King County tax code, which, you know, is a good thing, except for the fact that it could be very time limited. I mean, after 7 years of participating, you can, or actually, you can back out anytime you want. And there's a penalty that goes up to 7 years of taxes, but it's basically not a permanent solution in any sense. And we were wanting to add, and I forget, I'm sorry, Jesse, I forget where it is in the document, but but we wanted to add something to say, to specifically encourage donations. So for example, Engstrom Open Space was acquired through a combination of lower than market price on the property, and the family had a tax deduction for the difference. So let me I'm sure people can figure out where that is in the document and just take a note for the time being in terms of adding that language.
I think it's all the way up here. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't write it down. You could do a word search on King.
So Marie, here's that donor language.
Yeah, 1.9 also talks about it. Prepare land acquisition strategy to provide, but there's some place, I can send you an email.
Yeah.
I'll find the place where it's in the document and tell you where it is, but we did want to specifically put in something about donations because.
Oh, I know where it is. I know where it is. It's here. It's in open space.
While you're looking for that, Jesse, if I could jump in, there is an appendix that identifies all implementation tools and tactics, and dedications and donations is part of that under the acquisition subset, along with current use taxation and a whole host of other tools. So that's in the appendix in detail.
Oh, it's right here, Marie. It's 3.8.
Then maybe just take out the reference to King County and rely on the appendix.
Well, we specifically put this in here because we want to incentivize people to protect their property, even if they're only doing it for short term, because our thinking is even a short-term protection is better than no protection.
Sure.
But we can take we can circle back on that between now and the next meeting to make sure we've got the right donation language in here to complement this language.
Yeah, I guess my only thought would be 3.8 doesn't imply donations for it's a tax code oriented thing.
Yeah. The donation language was all the way up in section 1. This is in the this is in the environment and sustainability section. Well, let's take a look at that. See if there's a revision. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Garthy, we jumped off of 8.2, so we still haven't solved this one.
Yeah, and Councilmember Jacobson has a comment or a question.
My comment relates to 8.2 and the language provide, or actually one word, provide sufficient financial resources. I don't believe that that this is an appropriate place to, because the Parks and Rec people don't have the ability to ensure that. I would eliminate provide and say advocate for, because that would, seems to me what the commission would want to be doing.
Jake, would your opinion be changed if I just mentioned that this plan will be adopted by the council and become an appendix to the comprehensive plan? So it would become a citywide objective at some point in the near future?
Well, that's all fine and good, but my concern is that this ties somebody's hands, or whereas that's something the council has to grapple with, and to ensure if we're being told by somebody under the comprehensive plan exhibit A and the parks deal requires that this funding be provided, and we're looking at an unlimited number of demands and a limited bunch of revenues. And I think it's bad policy to be saying that we're going to do something when that's we may not have the resources to do that. So I think it's a bad idea to add something that limited that's not readily accomplishable. Let me put it that way. Whereas advocacy of it would be. Not make that point very clearly, but in any event, that's my consideration on it.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yeah, this is Don Cohen. I appreciate that comment, but there are all sorts of places throughout this document that are saying, okay, the city should do this, and all sorts of things that are going to cost money. This to me is just an umbrella that covers those things. I understand the council member's point, but but advocate for doesn't really get to it. This isn't just a planning, Parks and Rec Commission document. This is a city document. So I don't know whether it's provide sufficient financial resources where feasible or something, but that waters it down. I mean, it's a pretty fundamental point, but I understand the council member's point on it too, but it's all throughout this document.
Well, I'm just, that's my observation, and perfectly willing to defer to you guys, your thinking on these things. So, that's.
This is Commissioner Westberg. I had scratched the word provide when I first read this and looked at and put the word pursue, because that implies a commitment to try to accomplish it without necessarily tying anybody's hands that you're to do it. I mean, it's a statement of intent, not of result.
Pursue is a good revision, just from the staff chair.
That's great. I think that's an excellent way of killing two birds with one stone.
Ms. Don Cohen, I don't disagree with that one.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll change it to pursue.
Are we okay with this language? I've kind of been toggling back and forth, taking out the reference to the budget. We like that?
I've got a thumbs up from Lori. Commissioner Cohen? All right, we've got thumbs up.
All right. This one. This is the economic development objective that we struggled with the last time. It's had a whole tour of duty through the Arts Council. Recommended we keep it and suggesting some additional changes. So. What do we think?
Commissioner Struck.
Yep, thank you. As I kind of re-looked at this one a little bit, I was struggling. And maybe Jesse, we say collaborate with the community planning and development park on economic development initiatives. Can you give examples of what, if you had an unlimited budget, if you will, what things we'd be suggesting or doing?
Sure.
I get the buy local. That's kind of straightforward, but I'm just,
I'll pick some really low hanging recent program examples. The economic development team, which is one staff person plus the community planning and development director, is housed in the community planning and development department. I can probably take out that reference if it's too much. But the Halloween trick or treat in town center, that was the recreation team working with the planning department, with businesses and the chamber. The Illuminate MI program that's coming up is also that same group of people working together. So we're trying to, we talked last time about the nexus between events and programs that we do in our business areas. That also includes the South End, and how we can collaborate. If the pumpkin walk had happened, for example, that got canceled due to COVID, but one of the decisions we had made was not to have food trucks and instead to promote people dining in the town center before or after the event. So those are, recreation is an economic engine, and we want to make sure we're paying attention to that. This goal may still not quite get us there. I will also mention that economic development, I think I said this last time, is one of the top 4 big goals from the city council. So we wanted to reflect it here somewhere. And those are just the little things, right? Because then you think about the bigger things like Mercer Park being a clean, well-maintained facility, the sculpture park being nice. It all is about, attracting businesses and a vibrant town center, of which the park system is a part of.
okay, thank you.
All right, so do we have a thumbs up on this wording, or does somebody have another suggestion for this wording? So put your hands up if you have any comments. Vice Chair Struck.
So where we say related to parks, recreation, and cultural program, do we want to add open spaces, or is that an omission by design, or?
Yeah, we could. Yeah,
because I guess my thinking is, if there's not a strong reason not to have it in, then I would include it.
I wonder if this should be zoomed out a bit and just say parks and recreation programs and services. This language, I think some of it came from the Arts Council. Or we can add, where you see the word parks in the plan, you often see comma, open spaces and trails. We usually add all those things together.
Commissioner Burstein.
This is Paul Burstein. Parks and Recreation is a department. I don't think we need to call out open spaces every time we're calling out the department.
So capitalize Parks and Recreation and just consider it.
I would just do this.
Inclusive, yep.
I don't think it would be capitalized here because we're not calling out the department.
Got it.
Does that look okay now?
Chair McCarthy, if I could chime in, this is Ryan Daly. Just to speak a little bit on behalf of the Arts Councils, and having been at that meeting, there was a want to include arts and culture, because a lot of that does relate to some of that town center development that we're seeing, specifically with the art gallery or with the sculpture gallery and whatnot. So I would just put that out there, that it was a pretty strong topic of conversation during their meeting.
So yeah, I don't feel like we need to put open space into this because I don't think that it's relevant to this, but that makes sense about having the cultural arts programs in there as well.
All right, I just put it back the way it was.
Yeah, I agree. We don't need to have open space in there. All right, is this good?
All right, we're so close. Oh, this is the same one.
I feel like we're at the end now.
Yeah, there are two hangers honors that I'm not sure what to do with. The trust asked why there weren't any objectives relating to off-leash dog areas or off-leash dogs. Probably because it's my least favorite topic on top of coyotes and cougars. I did go back and look at the document, and I would look to you. I'm not sure what I would add. And then the same comment was related to mountain bikes and mountain biking not being in there.
Commissioner Westberg?
Well, in response to the mountain bike issue, we have not singled out any other recreation user group and put specific goals or objectives in addressing their needs. So I just think that's consistent. And besides which, I'm not quite sure what the mountain biking issue would be. It didn't really surface in the community engagement process that we've gone through so far. And with regards to dogs off leash, I would say the same thing. I think we haven't articulated a specific goal. There are dog-related developments proposed in individual management plans or dog-related protocols, but other than that, it's pretty much status quo.
I would just say for that 5.3 says expand service offerings for water-oriented recreation programs. So is there
Yeah,
something?
but that doesn't address canoeists or boaters.
No, it
it's just water in
doesn't.
general. Yeah.
I mean, we generically hit programs, again, back to that section on youth and teens.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
So anyway, I would say we don't need I don't see that we need a goal to address either of those or an objective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to make sure that we got everything. I think we did. Sorry, it's busy.
Jesse, this is Commissioner Westberg again. I did have a question about objective 4.5. It's not on your matrix, but it would be on your document.
Actually, thank you for bringing this up. The trails section was completely overhauled and it's not in your matrix, but happy to talk about it.
Okay, if you just read that goal, I wasn't quite sure what it was saying.
Yeah, I contemplate, this is 4.5 you're looking at, right?
Correct.
So the development review process is the permitting process. It's when properties develop. Basically what this is saying is, Commissioner Westberg, if you're developing your property and we've identified a trail corridor adjacent to it, then in an adopted plan, we would expect that to be incorporated as part of your development.
Okay, well, the way it reads is to require development projects along designated trail routes to be incorporated as part of the development project. So it's reading development projects incorporated as part of the development project. So something's wrong with the syntax.
Mm-hmm. How about this?
The idea is the trail, right, would be incorporated.
I think I just had extra some words in there. Yeah.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Anything else on the Anything else on goals?
On the 3.6, we took out pursue opportunities to limit or reduce impervious surfaces. And we adopted Steve's suggested wording for 350.15.
Okay, Steve, I'll just have you send that to me. Unless, yeah, this is not it. So I'll work with Steve offline to make sure that gets into the final version.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we done with chapter?
I think we're done.
This is Commissioner Struck. I can submit them, but I have on the document, I have several small comments. I should have probably sent them in early, but I didn't get around to it.
And Peter,
I would prefer to go through them if everyone's amenable to that, so we can get the cleanest version possible for the next time.
okay, go.
Okay, so on goal 1.15, in the second line where it says, and applying crime prevention, are we missing a word there? Shouldn't it be like crime prevention measures or something like that? I'm not sure how you apply crime prevention.
This should be capitalized. This is a thing, crime prevention through environmental. Whoops. This is a best practice standard, SEPTED.
Got it. All right, next one, Peter.
Right. Let's see here. On 2.2, the last word in the goal, impact, shouldn't it be plural impacts, the failure of its assets in terms of financial, community, and environmental impacts?
Yep.
All right. And then in 3.1, where we start and we say preserve and protect open space areas, should we say open space and parkland areas? Wouldn't the environmental features really apply to both?
Yeah.
And then in kind of 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, I just think that, we're saying we want to incorporate all these things. I just wanted to add the word cost effective. So like incorporate cost effective sustainable practices. And I mean, you can kind of go through there, cost effective, high efficiency fixtures. I guess the idea being is that, there's a trade-off between, being smart as opposed to just doing stuff. Same thing with like 3.4, pursue cost-effective sustainable design alternatives and so forth.
I added it. I presume if any of the commissioners don't agree, they'll jump in. Those. Okay.
And then in 3.8,
Commissioner Cohen has a comment.
Oh
yeah. I guess my only thought is that, how somebody defines cost effective may vary from person to person. I don't have a problem with the concept, but it gets into major issues of promoting differences of opinion. But I can't say that I disagree with the insertions. So.
And Commissioner and Don, I mean, my view is it's just an awareness issue. You're right. We could all debate, what is cost effective, but I think it's just kind of that idea of an awareness.
Yeah.
Then in 3.8, the second sentence where it begins, pursue low cost and non-purchase options to preserve open space. Again, I would suggest adding and parkland or open space and parkland.
I'm sorry, which one was that? 3.8.
3.8.
3.8. Oh. And parkland.
Yeah. Let's see here. So yeah, the last one, 7.5. I appreciate your patience here. Here we're talking in general about communication. And I was thinking of adding a sentence kind of maybe at the end. And this might be overkill, but I'll just throw it out there. I said, communicate the value of the city's investment in parks, open spaces, and recreational opportunities by highlighting the benefits such as better human health, increased community interaction, favorable environmental conditions, increased revenue, and higher property values, or some subset thereof. But again, I'm trying to, that I think, and I really put it in here because I think in terms of asking the community for additional levy dollars or whatever, we really are going to have to communicate the value proposition to the community. And in looking at the current way 7.5 is worded, I don't really come away with that thought.
I got the first three words, but
Okay.
I heard
So,
the intent.
Yeah, so communicate the value of the city's investment in parks, open spaces, and recreational opportunities by highlighting the benefits such as better human health, increased community interaction, favorable environmental conditions, increased revenue, and higher property values.
Increased community interaction.
Yeah, favorable environmental conditions, increased revenue and higher property values.
Thoughts?
This is Don Cohen. Peter, I'm surprised you didn't say communicate cost effectively the value of the little.
Point well taken, Don. Point well taken.
Well, this is Commissioner Westberg. I'd suggest we don't need to do it now, but just take a look at that goal statement and see if it can be condensed somehow to communicate that idea. I think Peter's point is an important one, but it's getting to be an essay in terms of its length. And I think you could capture that idea as well as, which is actually implicit, I believe, in some of the other wording ahead of that. So maybe there's a way to tighten that up.
Yeah, and I'm very open to that.
Or make it a separate, Don Cohen, make it a separate one before 7.5, maybe.
Shall we leave it in, and when we come back next month, see if, let it marinate, see if we still like it? Condense, okay.
Yeah, and I think staff could take a shot at doing something with it. That I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like we have done chapter 4.
Yeah, I will stop sharing.
All right, so I think we had talked about having a break now before we get into the feedback for the 2023-2028 Parks Capital Improvement Plan. So we will take a 10-minute break right now, and it's 4:25. We'll come back at 7:25. We'll come back at 7:35 and jump back into the capital improvement program. Thanks. All right, it is 7:35. And we are back from our break to start the capital improvement project section.
All right. I do have I'm going to flip back to our PowerPoint. Give me just a moment. Okay, whoops. You all have this on your screens now? Yep, okay. So just a reminder where we're at with the capital improvement program. We handed off an early initial draft to you at your last meeting. We're taking another look tonight, and then certainly you'll have an opportunity for any further revisions at your December meeting. Hopefully we'll wrap up revisions by then because we're getting ready to hand off a recommendation to the council. So I'm going to walk through some information on how we got to the CIP that we've got, and then I'm prepared to have a conversation about any of the projects you'd like. We probably don't have time to go through every single one of them. So let's just dive in. I want to just make sure we're all grounded in the terminology. CIP we use to mean capital improvement program. So this is long range planning, guides our investments in our public infrastructure. And we have to have a CIP for things like grants and impact fees. So just remember that. We also have to have a CIP to meet the requirements of the Recreation and Conservation Office through Washington State to be grant eligible. As we're preparing the CIP, we're checking back and making sure it's aligned with our master plans. So examples, Aubrey Davis and Luther Burbank. So this is really important, and I fielded some questions on this today. The CIP is not a budget. You're not recommending a budget to the city council. You're recommending a plan. But this plan certainly does inform future budget decisions. So here's an example. I screen snipped this as one of the spreadsheets that came out in your packet today. Once this plan is adopted, what will happen is it rolls forward in the next 2 years. The 2023-24 proposed projects are considered for the 23-24 budget. But I will tell you, and Vice Chair Struck was very good and reminded me about this morning, this doesn't guarantee the projects are moving forward, right? We often see they're taken off the list, they're revised, sometimes they're postponed. So I just want to emphasize, this is a plan. This is a plan, but it will move forward into 2022 and would help us drive our budget recommendations to the city council. All right, I want to remind you also, capital planning has a long, we're looking out a long time. I think commissioners, you have a better sense of this than anyone, especially given how close you've been to the Luther Burbank dock work. You know that some of the projects proposed on our list will take many years to permit and design, particularly the shoreline projects. We want the projects on the list, even if we don't have the revenue for them yet, we want them there because that allows us to go find the resources to fund them, whether it's grants, it's partnerships, whatever that might be. We're also mindful of making sure we have the resources, the project management resources to design, construct, and plan for all these projects. And the other thing is it gives us an opportunity to look at how we might be more efficient in combining the projects. And we've done that already. We've combined some athletic fields projects together. We're looking at doing joint master plans for Groveland and Clark. So before we dive into the projects, I know some of you had a strong reaction to the revenue. And I just want to walk through a high level so that you know what's going on in the background. First of all, just a big zoom out on the city's budget. I promise you I won't torture you with all this information. Here on the left, we have a number of funds that provide resources for capital projects. The city's a full service city, so stormwater, sewer, water, street fund. But what I want to call your attention to is this. The capital improvement fund, which is like the bank account for the capital improvement fund, includes all of these things. Funding for open space management, public parks, and buildings. So we have one fund that is dedicated, and it's important to understand this. The resources are shared between open space, parks, and the city's buildings, right? And that's important because I'm sitting at City Hall today. I was in the basement earlier today that was flooded. We have major infrastructure needs on the city's facility side of the house too, right? So you can start to see how these resources are competing. So the resources for parks, open space, and city facilities are combined into one fund. We pay for parks capital projects using a whole suite of revenue tools. Real estate excise tax is the biggest contributor right now and historically. We also have impact fees. That's the fee assessed on new development. So the Jinghua development in town center will pay impact fees. And those impact fees can only be used for growth or capacity projects, right? So impact fees are growth pays for growth. Certainly we have grants, we have a levy voted debt. There's partnerships. We have a legislative appropriation right now from the state for a project in Aubrey Davis. The other thing is we have a sinking fund for turf replacement. So when our user groups pay a fee to use our athletic fields, a portion of that revenue is set aside into what we call the turf replacement sinking fund. And that helps cover some of the costs when we have to replace the turf on synthetic turf fields. It does not cover all of the costs. That is part of the problem that you're seeing here in the revenue projections. So here's what I want to tell you about real estate excise tax. And I ignore the slide except to say that it's an excise tax, 0.5% on property transactions. It's been performing quite well. If you're following the real estate market in the Puget Sound area, you know we're doing well. The city council, there's REIT 1 and REIT 2. So that 0.5% is divided right in half. The council sets policy on how REIT resources are used. So what I want to point out to you, there won't be a test, you don't need to remember that, is that right now 100% of REIT 1 is going to the capital improvement fund. So 100% is going to pay for parks, open space, and buildings. REIT 2 is split a little bit differently. 90% goes to the street fund for transportation projects and 10% to the capital improvement fund. So that is a policy decision. At any time, the council may toggle that split. So when I'm preparing a revenue forecast for you, I am making the assumption that generally this split on REIT is going to hold. It may not. The council may make a different policy decision going forward. So I want you to be aware that that's one of the many assumptions. Here's just to give you an idea of how we've been doing with REIT. This is a screenshot from the 21-22 budget. So this was prepared in 2020. And if you look right here, we had the actuals. So real estate excise tax actuals were about $3.5 million in 2019. In 2020, we were forecasting to finish the year at 3.7 million. And you can see the forecast extends out here. What actually happened in 2020 is we finished the year at 4.3, I think it actually rounded up to 4.36 million. So we came in above projections. And also important to note, and this is mostly good news, unless you're trying to buy a home right now, of course. Our recent forecast, just as of last week, is that in 2021, we'll be at 5.5 million. We budgeted 2021 for 3.8 million in REIT, so quite a margin there. And we're also forecasting 5 million now in 2022. So there's excess revenue coming in real estate excise tax above what we projected. Now I'm telling you this because this was another assumption. I'm assuming that some of that excess will be diverted to support the park's needs. That's not my decision to make, right? I've plugged it in because I know where that extra revenue is coming from, but ultimately next year, when we get to the budget discussion for 23-24, the staff will prepare a recommendation to the council and the council will decide where the excess REIT revenue is going. Again, it will be shared between parks, facilities, open space, and transportation. It can also be used for other things like stormwater utilities. So this is a good news story. REIT is strong, but we don't know how long that will hold. If the real estate market stays hot and home sales continue to be where they are, we could see more revenue coming in for capital programs. All right, so this is my takeaway that I wanted you to be aware of before we dive into the projects. Historically, about $2 million of the city's annual REIT revenues goes into the CIP fund. Remember, that's a shared fund, building, parks, open space. So it's about $2 million. Of that $2 million, about 70% gets earmarked for parks. So as a city, the CIP fund has always leaned heavily towards parks because we have a lot of resources to steward. So the split, right, how those resources get split between parks, facilities, and open space, again, that's a council policy decision, and it's based on a lot of things. Need, infrastructure. I mentioned I was standing in a flooded building today. So I need to share this because while REIT is performing well, the city as a whole has an incredible number of infrastructure needs, right? Parks, we have some issues, but we also have some big challenges with city buildings, City Hall, the maintenance building. So just for awareness. So Jesse, this sounds like a really big headache. Well, it is, but hey, we're headed into a budget discussion. So what I need to acknowledge is I put the revenue numbers together preliminarily because we needed to at least see where we might be. I caught some errors actually after I put your packet out, but we're working ahead of the budget process. So we don't even start the budget process until the first quarter of next year. Our next revenue forecast isn't until July, September, and we're way back here. We're still going to adopt a recommendation and plug it in, but obviously it will go on a journey. The CIP will go on a journey in 2022 as part of the budget process. And the Parks and Rec Commission will be kept informed of that and possibly even be consulted about a revised recommendation. So if it feels like we're ahead of the budget process, we are. I just want to acknowledge we are. So this is, and I'm going to try not to torture you with spreadsheets tonight, but this was a screenshot of that revenue summary that I put in your packet. And so there's a couple things that I'm doing here as I'm preparing my assumptions. One is I'm assuming that we're going to take some of that excess REIT from a couple years of success and plug that into 2023 to help balance us. I also caught an error out in 2028. I left off some REIT revenue, so that's why 2022 tailed off. Most of these numbers for real estate excise tax were based on projections that were already done. I may talk with finance and nudge them up a bit for our next meeting, just so you can see where we're at. We have a King County Parks levy. I've programmed that in. The King County levy brings in just a little over $200,000 a year. It ends in 2025. The CIP doesn't assume it's going to be renewed, but if it is, we would hope that we would again start receiving capital resources. So what I'm trying to point out here is this number looks pretty frightening, but as we tick forward, additional revenue becomes available and things are shifting all the time. I will also mention, and this was the other error I caught, we have a levy right now that ends in 2023. It actually contributes about $250,000 a year towards capital programs. I've got an error in the spreadsheet somewhere. I've only reflected 100,000. So once that gets fixed, that'll help our bottom line. If that levy is renewed with the same kind of financial split that we currently have, then again, you can anticipate we'd have some additional capital dollars in the out years of the CIP. So remember, this is a dynamic document. It gets updated every 2 years. Assumptions are changing. A couple other things, impact fees, as we collect them, we hold them until we have a project that is eligible for use. So we have a capacity project. What this spreadsheet shows, just to give you an idea of what I'm thinking, is when that new restroom building goes in at Aubrey Davis, that is new capacity. So I can use impact fees to pay for new capacity. Okay, see how this puzzle is coming together on the revenue side? A couple of other just really quick things. The sinking fund for the turf replacement, it's probably underestimated a little bit. This is our current dollars. I'll be working with finance to project 21 and 22. So that number will go up. Grants. So how do we handle grants? You know, it's a bit of a dartboard exercise. I'm going to be honest with you. When you have a project like Luther Burbank Docks on your list, that is a very strong contender for grants. And we feel, let's say, greater than 60% certain about those grants. So that revenue is plugged in. Some of the other things like athletic field grants, those are really competitive. We think 50-50. Trails, yeah. So unless the staff team is feeling like this is a very strong contender, and sometimes the grant agencies reach out and say, this project's a strong contender, put it in. We don't show the grant revenue. So that's kind of, again, it's another assumption. We plugged in the grants where we think they're looking pretty strong. One final note here, WashDOT, we have an agreement with WashDOT for maintenance of Aubrey Davis Park. This is again where my optimistic crystal ball is hopeful that we'll renegotiate that agreement and we'll have additional resources coming in for capital projects in Aubrey Davis. But right now we've just held that constant. So, whoops, aside from the couple of errors, this is a preliminary revenue assumption. So we're not going to spend tonight talking about revenues unless you have, you know, specific questions. I'm happy to answer them. Really what our focus should be on for the pros plan is the project list, handing off to the council the project list that you feel strongly about over the next 6 years. Are you satisfied with the list of projects? Is it the right mix? Do they align with our infrastructure needs? Recall that we did a big assessment back in 19 and 20 as part of the pros plan. And based on what we've heard through the project, is this a mix of projects that our community supports? So my last little clip on this slide is just to remind you, I put the revenue in because we have to ground ourselves in reality, right? We have to know that we don't have unlimited resources. And if it became overwhelming, believe me, you should see the spreadsheet that backs up all those numbers. It's quite complicated. That's why the revenue is there. So unless there's any question on revenue, really where I wanted to go tonight then was to walk back through the projects, and I won't go through every project. We'll go category by category, and you can tell me what you'd like to talk about. And then if you have questions about projects, if something should be on the list or off the list, this would be the moment tonight to have that conversation. So let's keep going. The first thing I'll just mention is in the final pros plan, we'll have a map that looks somewhat like this. It's a little busy, but it shows the location of all of the proposed projects in the CIP. And certainly as the staff were preparing this recommendation, we were looking for a balance, not only of types of projects, but across the entire island. We do tend to be a little heavy on the north end with the big parks, but I think we've struck a good chord here. So this map will be part of the pros plan. I know it's impossible to read on your screen. Okay, so the first category, and by the way, this presentation is literally in the order they show up in the spreadsheet. So athletic fields, what I want to point out here is really the key themes of the CIP is maintenance and safety, right? Stewarding what we have. We have a lot of safety projects in the mix, replacing backstops at nearly every single field. We have some key turf replacements that have to be done. And we did look for some efficiency, right? Where we can combine all these projects that are stacking up together into kind of one design bid process. Where we have capacity potential is we're proposing to put synthetic turf on the south field of Island Crest Park. So that's the highlights. This map, I hope it shows up okay for you. This is that parks map, and I've just shown where the athletic field projects are. So you've got Aubrey Davis Park, Island Crest, and the South Mercer playfields. So a good spread across the island of athletic field projects. This is another screen snip from your packet, and these are all the projects proposed. The estimated expenditures, by the way, whoops, this number is incorrect, so I need to get that fixed. Island Crest Park Southfield backstop replacement project is closer to 310, 15,000 escalated. So that will get fixed. And then down here is just the estimated revenue associated with these projects. So I have slides prepared on every single one of these projects to describe them. We will be here till, I don't know what time, if I go through every one. So what I might suggest is if you have any questions about these projects, I'll just go to that slide. Otherwise, I'll move to the next category. Does anyone have a question on any of these athletic field projects? Vice Chair Struck.
Yeah, yes. Could you go through the Island Crest Park, the Southfield light replacement one?
Sure.
And the turf upgrade?
Yep. Okay, so this is, and I think my colleagues are still hanging on here, so they may be able to answer some of the questions. So currently at Island Crest Park, the north field is fully turfed. The south field is natural grass. We have two projects, actually three projects here technically. Backstop replacement, we're proposing to turf the entire field and also to replace, I believe, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, or Paul, the light poles and the lights. This is one of the last remaining fields to, well, I shouldn't say one of the last. This field we're proposing to convert to synthetic turf. It expands capacity for athletic field use and allows for all season play. Did I miss anything, Jason or Paul?
No. Got it.
This is probably a contender for grants because it is a new synthetic turf field. We'd be converting it. But we'd be in a competitive grant pool.
So this is Commissioner Struck. Just one question. So if we turf this area as is recommended, what kind of pressures does it alleviate on other facilities or similar areas that we have?
Mm-hmm.
I can answer it. Jason Kinner, Chief of Operations. So these fields, all of our athletic fields are highly used, as you've seen the weather today. And as we get into the winter weather in particular, the fields become very challenging and problematic. For grass fields, we typically actually close them down to the winter use to prevent them from excessive damage. And so what you'd be looking at doing would actually be expanding the use into the winter months. By the fields already, this field already has lights on it. So replace one of the poles with newer lights, better efficiency, less spillover into the neighborhoods on Island Crest Way, and better usability for the players. What we've done on the north field is, and you can actually see some of the lining on that north outfield. We didn't do inlaid markings in that outfield so that we can paint it accordingly for the different types of use. So Island Crest Park in particular has seen some of the changes in uses for the types of sports that are played out there because that field allows for multiple uses, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's soccer, whether it's football, baseball, you name it. It has the ability to be used for all different types of sports.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen?
Don Cohen, are those the lights that that the osprey nest is in, or is that the north one?
Paul, I'm going to look to you. I don't believe we have osprey nests in zones, but I could be wrong.
I'm Paul West, CIP project manager. I don't know exactly that there's a nest there now. I think there may have been in the past.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been relatively recent because you hear them all the time. But anyway, that's an aside that I don't know whether there are some issues, but that's for you guys to deal with.
Yeah, it is. This is Commissioner Westberg. It is an active nest.
Great, thank you for flagging that. Put that on our list. I suppose while we're on athletic fields, I just wanted to mention, I'll send this monstrous PowerPoint out to all of you. it got done about 30 seconds before the meeting started, but where I've noted these little kind of urgent warnings. This is, for example, the Island Crest Park North, the infield turf has to be replaced. It's at the end of its useful life. And with synthetic turf, we have to meet certain standards related to compaction and resiliency. And at the end of about 10 years, we're either usually shutting the field down or replacing. So Island Crest is in that boat, and so is the South Mercer playfields infields. They have to be replaced. The turf has to be replaced. So,
Vice Chair Struck. You're on mute.
Thank you. Do you, I mean, and maybe this is too preliminary, but I mean, do you anticipate greater parking challenges with both fields being turfed? Or is there sufficient parking? Maybe that's a better way to put it.
I think, this is Jason Kennedy, Chief of Operations. I think the parking challenges will remain sort of status quo. I think all of these facilities during the peak season all have their own programmatic challenges and are in full bookings, full capacity, and the parking. We're not gonna add more users to the field than we already are now during the peak season. So I think the parking situation remains sort of status quo. It is something that we continue to evaluate and look at, work with our Mercer Island Police during high peak activities. Usually the opening day of the league baseball season tends to be a challenging weekend that we work with our police department on. But I don't think there's going to be any significant change because of the capacity that these fields would add would be really throughout the rest of the course of the year, through the darker, drearier months of the winter weather periods, not necessarily during the peak season.
Thank you.
Also avoid, I'm not sure how often this field gets closed, but like Aubrey Davis Park, the Lid soccer field, we do have to close it for maintenance and rehab. So when you put synthetic turf down, those closures, except for the every 10-year replacement, become virtually non-existent. All right, I will move on. By the way, I think every single picture except one is from our Parks and Recreation system. And I have to say, it's a stunning place we live in. So that's been a fun journey through all these photos. Thanks, Meryl, for helping out. Beaches and shorelines, you all know this better than anyone. Beaches, waterfront, shorelines, docks, water activities came out as a strong theme and high support from our community. Unfortunately, many of our facilities are pushing up on 50 years old. They were all built at the same time. So Groveland, Clark, and Luther being the strong contenders. We have to either replace what's there and restore, or we're going to be having a conversation about decommissioning. I'll just remind you that once you take out a dock in its footprint, it's really challenging to permit it and put it back in the same way. ADA accessibility is a theme throughout the CIP, improving accessibility. This is where a big chunk of the costs, your beaches and shorelines projects are driving a lot of the costs in the CIP. So this is the map showing where the projects are located. Again, Luther, Groveland, Clark, pretty good balance across the system. This is a screenshot of the spreadsheet that was in your packet. So these are your projects: Luther, the swim beach, Luther docks. What I'll say about the Groveland and Clark, and maybe I'll just go to those slides, is we've plugged in placeholders here, cost estimates that we think are in the ballpark of what will be needed to address the shorelines and the docks. But certainly we're recommending completion of the master plan process to really know what would be planned at both of those facilities. I'll remind you, the revenue for beaches and shorelines, we are projecting, this is all related. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 proposed grants are tied to the Luther docks. So I'll just mention the swim beach renovation. This is at Luther. This is a project separate from the dock project. It addresses all of these retaining walls and bulkheads. It would include a restroom renovation, ADA access. This is a problem in Luther. So we'd bring an ADA accessible path, which won't be that challenging, from the south parking lot to the beach, and an ADA accessible entry into this beach. This is one of the only beaches that we can easily get ADA access to. So we've prioritized this location. Certainly Groveland is off the table, not possible. We do have some, you can see along here, we have lots of challenges with shoreline erosion, which is not great. So we hope to address that through this project. You're familiar with the Luther Burbank Dock project. It actually started already, technically, I think in 2020. So we're well on our way. I won't go over that. I did want to stop though, and I won't do it this level with all of the projects, but this is Groveland. And if you haven't been to Groveland lately, get out for a walk and take a look. This again is 50-year-old infrastructure. You have this bulkhead, and the water levels go up and down through the year, but if you look over the edge, the bulkhead is undermined. So it needs to come out. What we'd probably do, again, challenging permitting, pending a master plan, kind of build the bulkhead up, pull it back, and probably think about something like a zero entry beach. This dock, the headache of all docks. We did some renovation work on this several years ago, but it was really just to extend the life for about 10 years. So we bought ourselves some time, but probably not enough. So again, we're proposing to do a master plan to really get in here and think about how this beachfront transforms. I see a question there, Commissioner Cohen.
Yes, Don Cohen. Maybe you don't know this at this point. Would the dock replacement at Groveland also include those breakwaters, or do those remain?
That's a good question. I would probably have to defer to a talented overwater engineer, aquatics engineer to help with that decision making. The breakwater is in there to protect the existing dock from the waves. And I don't know, Paul or Jason, has that come up in previous discussions?
Paul West again. We're aware that there's issues with those with attenuators, yeah, I think they need to be reevaluated as what the need is. There certainly is a need for something because of the exposure of that beach, but I think that's would be part of the bigger design of that whole facility.
Yeah, Don Cohen again. Yeah, I mean, as Paul knows, I've raised in the past about that those, I guess you call them attenuators, the supports for those things really destroyed the opportunity to fish at Groveland, but not that that's the major issue. By the way, on this map, City Manager, it says Wildwood Landing, but isn't it Wildwood Park?
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Yeah, it's not on the water, as you know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to, and again, I won't go this. I think that shoreline projects are important to walk through, but I promise you I won't do this for all of them. So this is Clark. And again, I'd encourage you commissioners, because we think we're going to be doing a master plan, to get out and take a look at these two properties. Again, 50-year-old infrastructure, really hard in shoreline here, also being undermined, and this probably all needs to come out. Clark Beach is used very differently than Groveland and Luther. It gets a lot of shade, so it's kind of a different type of park. This is a pier that's also aging, and then we have this very unique swim enclosure. It's basically sheets of steel into the water that is going to be fantastically challenging to bring out because of the sediment that's built up over time. It's going to take a lot of permitting. But we think that swim enclosure needs to come out. So not to get ahead of a master planning process with the community, this shoreline probably has the potential to restore some ecological functions just through the removal of a heck of a lot of concrete. Because of that, and where it's located on the lake, and Jason can say more about this, we do think it will be a stronger contender for grants. But yeah, this is a pretty complicated project, but exciting to think that we'll get to that at some point. So that was the beaches and shorelines. I'll come back to the master plan in a minute. All right, let's move on. It's getting late. So the next category is open space and trails. And I'll just remind you, trails and trails connections was probably the #1 priority identified in both surveys, and also, you know, something we heard about quite a bit. Preservation, maintenance, and, you know, management of open space also was a high priority. So your CIP includes resources annually for open space management, trail renovation, and dedicated resources to Pioneer and Engstrom, excuse me. So I've just referenced that there. This is roughly where the open space and trails projects are. There's several in Aubrey Davis. I'm not sure I even have the right number of dots there. So again, you know, spread out pretty well across the island. And this is the project list. So for this one, I do think I'll ask, does anybody want more information on any of these projects? And I see I've got that typo again. Hollerbach is misspelled. I will fix that. Looks like Marie has a question or comment.
Well, just a quick question, because this table lists Pioneer for 191,000, but the previous one, which is the correct number?
It's this one. It's this one.
It's 180.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was copying and pasting, and I'll get that fixed.
Obviously a disappointing answer, but it is what it is.
Okay. Well, let me just highlight one, because this CIP doesn't have a lot of new stuff, but this is one new project. Hollerbach open space is virtually, well, it's not really accessible. So the project we've gotten here is constructing a new trail through the open space area. It'd be one of the only east-west pedestrian connections. We're pretty excited about including this project. One of the other things it does is building a trail allows us to get into it much easier for stewardship and maintenance. So this is one of the do something new projects in your CIP. And I will tell you, conveying from the trust last night, their wishes, this entire category of projects often gets swept, right? When it comes down to trying to balance the budget, because we have limited resources, most of these aren't safety projects or super urgent, but they were highly desired by your community. So that's why the staff put them in here. So the comments from the trust were like, hey, we got to do some trail, you know, you've got to fund trails and open space in addition to also dealing with athletic fields that need turf replacements and docks that need to be replaced. So, you know, the recommendation, and Marie can state it differently, is make sure this category doesn't get swept.
This is Commissioner Westberg. I just wanted to say, I think it's very exciting to see the Hollerback and the North Luther Ravine Trail on there. Those are projects that have been envisioned for a long time and will add a great deal to our trail system and to the interconnectivity of other open spaces. So exciting.
There are from time to time grants. Well, there is a whole trails grant category through the state. It's really competitive. We'd probably apply. We'd probably get a handful of them. I didn't feel confident enough though to plug in that grant revenue. But no, if the CIP gets adopted in this form, we will certainly be looking at those opportunities. All right, I'm going to move on then. Again, I'm going in order of your spreadsheet. So there were two projects in the other category just because they don't fit real easily anywhere else. One is Ellis Pond and one is this intersection work. So I'll just mention their other because their funding comes from a different place. These projects are actually fully funded. We're paying for the intersection work Jason's nodding his head, through the Transportation Improvement Fund, the street fund, and the Ellis Pond aquatic habitat enhancement evaluation. It's basically a planning exercise right now, will also be funded through the Stormwater Fund. This is to make sure we're taking care of Ellis Pond and stewarding it so the habitat doesn't die, essentially. Okay, aren't these pictures great? I know you guys are tired. I'm almost done, I promise.
Yeah, excuse me, Jesse, is the Ellis project just the planning phase, or is it actually to do the work?
It is just the planning phase. Honestly, we're not entirely sure what we need to do out there, but that would come back then as a potential additional project, or more likely, I think, through the city's operating budget, some operating resources. Jason, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I would just add that I think where Commissioner Westberg's going is if any improvements that would be made would likely still be paid for out of the stormwater fund, stormwater utility, because that's what's feeding into this pond is our stormwater infrastructure. So that's what we look to pay for with.
Okay, your park planning projects, you've got Mercerdale, the community center, and Groveland and Clark. So we've got on deck the Mercerdale Park Master Plan, Clark and Groveland, and the Annex Facilities Plan at the Community Center. Let me just say, Mercerdale is probably on deck for 2023. The importance of this project is, remember, we talked about there's a sewer line running right through here. If you go and stand in Mercerdale Park and you see that, you can see the depression, that's where the sewer line is. That pipe needs to be upsized. So when a project like this is going to happen, literally we're going to have to dig up the middle of this park. It's a good opportunity to step back and say, what other improvement projects might we want to do at the same time? So that's the master plan project at Mercerdale. It's like Vice Chair Struck has a question. Oops, you're on mute.
Sorry. This was really more about the timing. So, you know, looking at the sheet, I mean, all three master plans are scheduled to be worked on, completed in 2023. I guess my question was, I mean, that seems to be a lot of bandwidth for, you know, a focused period of time, I guess.
It sounds like death by planning, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you what we're going to recommend. You recommend for Groveland and Clark, because this is a 23-28 CIP. You know, we're showing the plan there. We actually are suggesting that plan be accelerated. And as soon as we wrap up this plan, the pros plan, the council fund that work to start in 2022. So that will solve that problem, but still a lot of planning work. We also have the same recommendation for the Annex Facilities Plan, which is a little less intensive than a master plan. This is the building. Are you familiar with this building? It's behind the community center. It's being held together literally with some duct tape. It was only supposed to be in existence until 2009, but as you know, budget and priorities. So what we do with that building, replace, renovate, that needs a planning exercise. We're also recommending that you recommended the council that we accelerate this work and fund it in 2022. Based on my knowledge of the budget and how REIT has performed, I think we'll have the resources to do that. And both of those plans then would be over the master plans, actually both master plans and this facilities plan would be under, would be in collaboration with the Parks and Rec Commission.
And Jesse, I'll just add on the Mercerdale Park plan, 2 weeks ago in front of the council, we were talking about ARPA funding and providing a list of projects that could be accelerated on the utility projects, on the utility side for potential ARPA funding. And this sewer project has been identified in the general sewer plan since 2003. and was re-evaluated as part of the 2018 general sewer plan and confirmed that it has capacity issues and needs to be upsized. And so it makes no sense for us to go in and do that sewer work without understanding how we're going to restore the park once construction is completed. So that sewer project is pushing the time frame for the Mercer Park master plan as well.
Vice Chair Struck, if you were hoping for a break after the pros plan was done, I'm afraid the Parks and Rec Commission is not going to get it.
I was thinking of a pay raise, but I'll defer that to later.
Okay. This category is huge. So this is all your parks projects, anything that doesn't fit in one of those other categories. And I'll just say the theme here is similar to the others, maintaining what we have. There's really very few new amenities proposed, except for like the new restroom building at Aubrey Davis. Everything else is a replace, update. We do propose continuing some of these annual investments we make in the park system. I will point out, we have money coming in from the levy that ends in 2023. So when if that levy is not renewed, then that's a loss of funding for us. I'm not sure I quite completed this map. A whole bunch of these projects are in or around Aubrey Davis Park. So the number of circles probably doesn't represent the actual number of parks projects. And this is the category where we have all of those playground replacements. So this is a list. I know it's a lot to look at on the screen. Did you have any questions about any of the parks projects? I'm scrolling real quick here to see if there's anything I should point out.
I do. This is Don Cohen. Over the last few weeks, I've gone to many of these street end parks: Franklin Landing, 56th Street Landing, Miller Landing, Forest Landing, Southeast 72nd, South Point. And I just, most recent one was South Point. And I was just curious. It's a very nice location. I wondered why that one made it to the 6-year CIP and the other ones are pushed out farther. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just curious.
Actually, there is a reason. It was to balance the projects across the map because we do have so many projects in the north. As we start to improve these street ends or these landings, we thought, why not start with South Point and work our way north? We've only got one in the CIP just because we had so many big projects, but I would anticipate, we'll try to do one landing update every 3, 4, or 5 years or sooner if more funding becomes available. So that's why.
Yeah, my only comment on that, just for whatever it's worth, is I thought about walking down there from my house, which is up at 61st, and going down the Fleury, down 84th Avenue, down the Fleury Trail, and then cutting down there. If I had done that, I would still be walking back up. That's, as you know, South Point, that's a long way down.
Yeah.
And it's steep. So from the point of view of accessibility, other than for people who live immediately down there, it's not quite as good as, Miller and Forest and some of those other ones that have numbers on them. So, but it is pretty.
It is. Most of the landings are this is actually South Point. They are some version of this. And what's on the 20-year list is, park signs, benches, parking if we can get it in, accessibility, ADA if we can get it in, cleaning up vegetation and landscaping. So if the commission would prefer to put in a different landing, that's not a problem. Anything else? Sorry to make you dizzy on this list. Nope. All right. I'm going to make you dizzy again. Go in the other direction. Sorry about that. All right, bringing it home here. Park property acquisition. This is a staff recommendation to establish a reserve account where we city start putting funding towards future acquisitions. It's growing a fund so that the resources available should we need it when we need it. The budget recommendation, that was mine. There was no art, or it was more art than science. I think we have to do something, right? Even if we can't do the $500,000 contribution, I think there has to be some intentional funding set aside every year in small amounts, so that when we need, even just an easement for a trail, the resources are there. So right now, what it looks like is this, 500,000 starting in 2025. Why did I start it in 2025? It's because I knew in the near term, we had a lot of projects loaded up in 23 and 24, and we were going to have a hard time balancing the budget. So I thought it was a little more aspirational to start in 2025. At the trust board meeting last night, I was asked, could some of this be included in the levy renewal? I think yes, we could make that a part of the levy renewal. That would be a future conversation. So that may be a funding alternative. So I think it's okay for this, knowing that we don't have dedicated revenue. I think it's okay to stay in. It's aspirational. It conveys an intent, and the dial can be turned on the amount as we get closer to that 25-26 budget cycle. All right, we are at our last category, rec facilities. This pretty north end dominant. It's the community center and the Luther Burbank boiler building. So I didn't put a key themes together, but it's mostly maintain, repair what we have. I did want to point out one project. It's sitting right here, the boiler building full renovation. It's a big ticket item. So let's go to this slide. In this biennium, we have the funding to do the seismic retrofits on this building. I'm not sure they're going to get done, so that money will carry forward and we'll try to get that project done next year. But the Luther Burbank master plan calls for this building to be converted to a boathouse to basically support water-oriented activities. And the reason that I put this in the CIP, it's a reach, I do understand it's an expensive project, is because water-oriented programs came out as such a high priority in our community process. And what the staff are conveying to me is, that's great, but we have to have the facilities to be able to provide these programs. So I think with the combination of the Luther Burbank docks being hopefully renovated, this building would be a natural sequence. It is a very expensive project. There potentially could be grants. Buildings are a little more challenging than docks, but it's a historic structure, so who knows? I left it in. It's one of those aspirational projects, but I did want to call out, it's one of the bigger ticket items, and it's not necessary, but we thought it aligned with the community process. And I think that was my last slide. I'll just remind you, I was looking tonight. I think we set aside, the revenue. You don't need to worry a whole lot about that. We just want to make sure that our list and our pros plan is the project list that you all support. Let's stop sharing. So any feedback, comments, changes? If not, we will carry this project. With all my errors I pointed out, we will get those fixed. We will clean up the project list and we will roll it forward into the plan, the full plan that you will see very soon.
Commissioner Westberg?
Just a quick comment and a compliment. I think it's an excellent list. It's an ambitious list. There are definitely some inherent funding challenges, but I think it's better to go aggressive and put together a list that reflects community input and what the system needs. And Paul is going to be a very busy guy.
We need to get Paul some help.
Commissioner Struck?
Yes, good, yeah. So just on that last one, the boiler, the full renovation, you're right. I guess I hadn't really focused on it, but that is a big ticket. And I start to think about, I think you made the comment that the building itself doesn't really need to be done, and maybe that I'm mischaracterizing, but I'm trying to think about, well, with $3.7 million, what else, what other things could we get done, and what's that trade-off? So that I kind of came down to is, and again, maybe this is too early, but is there like a partial kind of thing you can do, or is it really all or none?
Well, it's I need probably Paul and Jason to chime in here. It's a building shell right now. As I mentioned, we'll do the seismic work to stabilize it. And that big stack you saw, we're worried in an earthquake that will fall. So I think there's always a in between. Jason or Paul?
Paul West again. There is an in between. The build out is not. I wouldn't say it's a deluxe. It's not a sumptuous interior design. It would provide for a classroom, an office, and a balcony that overlooks the storage area, which would remain on the first floor. But the scope of that could be changed to some degree. I also think there may be cost savings. Commissioner Struck, you may remember at the last subcommittee meeting, we simplified the ADA access to the outdoor classroom. There may be opportunities similar for the remaining ADA access that we would need to do for that building, where we go with a softer surface trail that is more meandering. Right now, that cost basis is about $1 million of it is for a more structured ADA access. So I think there's some additional scoping that can be done to reduce price.
Thank you.
So as you think about that project, we intentionally parked it way out in the 6-year list. And as we roll forward and work on the next 6-year CIP, which will be in 2 years, we would evaluate then where that, if you want to keep it, is it still a priority? Does it need to move out because something else has moved up? What's our revenue situation at that moment in time? Keeping it on there now would certainly allow us just to keep an eye on, I think, potential grants, and I'm not sure what other opportunities there would be, perhaps a partnership through somebody that wants to come and lease the building and share in improvement costs or something. Well,
All right, sounds like we are done talking about those things. Thank you for that, Jesse.
yeah. So Chair McCarthy, I need to plug one more thing. So when we see you next, actually sometime in the next couple of weeks, you will get the rest of your draft chapters. Okay, and as you read them and you find either pesky edits or substantive changes, shoot an email to Beryl, and we're tracking all of those so that when we come back to you in December, we can work through them much the same way we work through chapter 4. So I'll be taking this list, cleaning it up, and putting it in your December packet. Important, the pros plan will include a handoff memo from the Parks and Rec Commission. So think about, and I'm going to take a stab at drafting it, the things you want to convey to the council as you hand off this plan. So we'll look at the handoff memo in December and in January. So things like in the CIP, I'm thinking about, council, make sure you have resources to pursue grants. Make sure you have enough project management staff. We feel strongly about, the projects in the CIP because they balance community need against infrastructure needs. So that's what we're going to start working on next, finishing the plan and your handoff memo. And if you want to meet with me, I welcome the opportunity to talk one-on-one and gather your ideas. I am now concluding my discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so we are now going to quickly transition into the rest of our meeting. I know we have third and fourth items on our list here. That is Ryan Daly, and he's going to give us a super fast version.
Good evening, everyone. Ryan Daly, Operations Transition Team Manager. We provided the Parks Commission with a staff report on Summer Camp 2021 review. I honestly don't have a presentation or anything to provide, but I'm willing to take any questions that may pop up or that the commission may have. I will say that the overall outcome of the summer was outstanding. We saw over $88,000 in revenue and over 1,600 participants, which is actually a typo within your staff report. I don't want to say we found more children, but we tightened up our numbers and were able to, we hadn't received any numbers from one of our camps that we were able to track down. And so that was extremely helpful, and want to make sure we mention that to the commission. In the future, we won't be coming forward with individual reports on individual programs, but we will be doing an end of the year recap that will report out on each of the different tiers within your cost recovery pyramid, so that you know where we're coming out as a recreation division. But with that, I will open up for any questions. Okay. Like I said, if you want to review this, please reach out to me with any questions as we move forward. You know, between now and the next meeting, if there's anything you want to discuss or any ideas that might come up, I think that's always a helpful conversation for me to have with commissioners. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. And then the fourth item of business is the planning and meeting schedule update.
So as you heard from City Manager Bond tonight, we do have a number of projects within that CIP that is going to really inform the commission's work schedule for 2022. And so what you saw coming immediately in December, we'll be bringing back some policy items for the recreation reset, which would be the facility allocation policy, as well as a special event policy, and then obviously bringing back the pros plan as well. What we'll be doing as staff over the next month is, in preparation for that December meeting, is we'll be bringing forward a planning schedule, so the commission knows sort of what the commitment looks like for 2022. As it was mentioned tonight, it's fairly extensive, but I do want to lay that plan out ahead of time. And that's going to be in conjunction with the Arts Council, as well as the Open Space Conservancy Trust, to make sure that we align those work plans. So, and then Chair, if you want, I'm happy to email out the department report. It's fairly comprehensive, so I don't know if you want me to go through that right now, or I would leave it to the commission's decision.
I'm happy with an email. If everybody's happy, thumbs up.
Commissioner Westberg's thumb went up really fast. That was pretty darn quick. So.
Excellent. All right.
I'm hungry.
I bet you are. All right, the sixth item of business is commissioner reports and work plan updates. Does anybody have any updates for that? Commissioner Struck. And you're on mute.
I promised myself I wouldn't do that again, sorry. Real quick, two things. First, if you didn't see this week's edition of the Mercer Island Reporter, page 1 above the fold, there was a great article on Luther Burbank's dock replacement project, CIP manager Paul West was quoted several times. I thought it was an excellent article. And again, I think it's a great way to communicate to the community on what's going on there. So kudos to Paul for that. And then secondly, Council Member Jacobson had to leave early, but he sent me a text. I'm not sure why he sent it to me, but he did. And he just wanted to say, if possible, please convey the unqualified appreciation of my city council member colleagues and me for the heavy lifting you and your colleagues are doing generally, and on the pros plan in particular. Good on you and the commission team, and keep on trucking. Thanks, Jake. So I'll end with that.
That's nice. Commissioner Cohen.
Yes, Don Cohen. I thought I'd just share one other thing. When I was down with one of my grandsons at one of these street end parks, I think it was Miller Landing, and we took our fishing rods down there, and we weren't catching anything. And I said, Zach, you've got to call, you got to say, hey, fishy, fishy. And right when he did that, a big salmon swam out from underneath the undercut bank and meandered slowly up the way. And I let Jesse and I think Ryan know about that, because it really brought home, and I was able to talk to my grandson about the salmon life cycle and all that sort of stuff. But it was really outstanding.
That's awesome. What a great story. Anyone else? All right. I just want to quickly add, on Tuesday, I was part of a meeting for the Aubrey Davis Trail with WashDOT and the City of Mercer Island, and the group that's going to be working on getting the design together. And that was really great opportunity to hear the brainstorming of everybody on that. And I think it's going to be really neat. Okay, so the time now is 8:41 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned. I will say before that, the next regular meeting, Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, is December 2nd, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. And this meeting is now adjourned. However, as a reminder to commissioners, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening and stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, everyone. Good meeting.